Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the first part of 14th lecture of Statistics and Probability Theory. In previous lecture, we have studied multivariate hypergeometric distribution. Multivariate hypergeometric distribution was the extension of hypergeometric distribution. Hypergeometric distribution possess the four properties in which the first property was each outcome of the experiment is classified as uh, two possibilities, success and failure. Experiment is repeated a fixed number of times and uh, each successive trial is dependent and probability of success changes from trial to trial. The difference between the hypergeometric distribution and multivariate hypergeometric distribution is that hypergeometric distribution has two possible outcomes, whereas multivariate hypergeometric distribution can have more than two possible outcomes. Topic of this lecture is negative binomial distribution. Let us consider an experiment where the properties are the same as those listed for a binomial experiment. As you recall the properties of the binomial experiment, they were that number one was the experiment has two possible outcomes which classified as success and failure. Experiment is repeated a fixed number of times. Each successive trial is independent and probability of success remains constant from trial to trial. So these are the four main properties, or you can say assumptions, of the binomial experiment, with the exception that the trials will be repeated until a fixed number of successes occur. So here the difference is occurring between the binomial experiment and negative binomial experiment, that all the properties will remain the same except that the trials will be repeated until a fixed number of successes occurs. So this statement gives us the indication that the number of trials will not fix. Therefore, instead of probability of x successes in n trials, where n is fixed, in the case of the binomial distribution, we are now interested in the probability that the kth success occur on the x trial. So, the difference between the binomial and negative binomial experiment is that now we are interested that we should have kth success on the x trial. Experiments of this kind are called negative binomial experiments. Properties of negative binomial distribution. For each trial, there are only two possible outcomes, success and failure. The same as binomial distribution, and the number of trial n are not fixed. Whereas in binomial distribution, the number of trials are fixed. The trials are independent. The outcome of trial is not affected by the outcome of any other trial. The probability of success, which we usually denote it as P, is constant from trial to trial. So these are the four main properties of the negative binomial distribution. And the difference between the binomial distribution and negative binomial distribution is that the number of trial n are not fixed. Probability mass function of negative binomial distribution, as it is the discrete distribution. So, if repeated independent trials can result in a success with probability p, and a failure with probability q, as we already learned this in binomial distribution, then the probability distribution of the random variable x, the number of the trial on which the kth success occurs, is probability of x is equal to small x is equal to x minus 1 combination, or you can say x minus 1 c k minus 1 p raised to power k q raised to power x minus k, where x is equal to k. Now this is the difference name. Usually in the case of binomial distribution, we started from the 0, 1, 2, 3 up to so on n. But now in the case of negative binomial distribution, and for this particular probability mass function, as it is defined for the k successes, so x will be equal to k plus 1, k plus 2 up to so on, where x represents the number of trials, k represents the number of successes, p represents the probability of success, q represents the probability of failure. So this is basically the probability mass function of the negative binomial distribution. In negative binomial distribution, we will do the experiment, or we will do the trials or the experiment until we get the required successes. Let's say that you will toss a coin until you get 3 heads. As you know that outcome of the tossing a coin would be head or tail. So if they make a restriction that you will toss a coin until you get 3 heads. So what you will do? You will keep tossing the coin until you get the required successes. So this is the negative binomial distribution. Whereas in binomial distribution, what you do, you simply toss a coin and there would be 2 outcomes. One is mentioned as success and second one would be the failure. But in the case of negative binomial distribution, you will keep you will keep performing the experiment or the trial until you get the required successes.